Hello folks and welcome to After Dark with DC, the web developer extraordinaire. Sometimes it's nice to come on when it's late, it's just gone past midnight, the lights are low. And I like to come in every now and again, say hello and talk about some of the things that are on my mind, you know. I'm looking at the screen, I'll show you what I'm looking at in just a minute. But what I want to talk about is how JavaScript is dead. And some of you have already clicked the thumbs down. And some of you are like, well, now he's really lost the plot. But hear me out. I think, without trying to sound too smug, 99% of you will not understand what I'm about to talk about, but 1% will. I'm fully aware that JavaScript dominates YouTube and Udemy, and I'm aware of the popularity of things like React Native and all of that stuff. Believe me, I've done my time, I've put in the hours. But for high-performing developers, JavaScript's dead. And to tell you why that's the case, I'm going to take you back to about 5 years ago, before Trongate, before Speed Coding Academy and everything. And I just want to give you a little reminder of what my own life was like back then. So 5 years ago, I was doing work for a car leasing company. They got in touch and asked me to build a system for their call center. This was something that I had done before for another car leasing company. It was about 1 million lines of code. But because my integrity is unshakable, I decided I'm not going to do a copy and paste. I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to just rebuild from scratch and maybe make it a little bit different. I'm not the guy who just copies and pastes, you know. And I figured that since I'd done this before, it wouldn't take me too long. I thought maybe 3 months. So this company was good enough to take me on board, and I predicted I would need 3 months to build the thing. And 3 months passed like that, and the thing had not been built. It just so happens that I was doing a few YouTube videos at the time. And I know the lights are low here, but let me show you what I looked like back then. So this, is my mic on? Yep. This is one of my YouTube videos then. And that's not slow motion, by the way. That's what I looked like then. Now, that's a guy right there who is utterly exhausted. I mean, maybe you can't see it, but just look at my demeanor, right? Look at the right-hand side of this screen, the cans of Red Bull. Here, that'll be a black coffee in there. I'm absolutely exhausted. Look at me rubbing my eyes, right? And then, just so you know, here's another one. It's around about the same time. And this is not me showing off. This is how I was living. Same place, by the way, but in this one I'm wearing, you can see the titles are giving away a whole lot here. Here I'm wearing an eye patch. And that's not showing off or anything or trying to be funny. I had to go to a chemist to buy an eye patch. In fact, I had to get somebody to go for me because I couldn't go in the sunlight. And on the right hand side here is a green screen. I ordered this from someplace thinking I could use it for fancy backgrounds and stuff. In the end, the only thing I used it for was blocking out the sun. And I remember I just had these really terrible headaches. My eyes were always sore. And that was my life. I was overworked and exhausted and making no progress. Now, back then, that was a real nightmare project. And I ended up, I kind of had a sort of web developer, well, I suppose you could say a kind of web developer's breakdown. By the way, I just noticed in the edit that one of those videos I'm wearing a t-shirt that's inside out. And if you think that's looking a little bit downtrodden, wait till you see this video that I just found. This is a private one. But have a look at the nick of me in this video. I mean, I'm laughing, but I look as if I've fallen out of a skip. And you'll see, when you see my eyes, you'll just see that I'm exhausted. Look, always rubbing my eyes, right? Just wiped out. Somebody had left a comment on this video and said that I look like a hobo. I never even knew what that word meant. I had to look it up. And I'm not looking for sympathy or anything, but have a look at the title and then have a look at the description. Interesting, eh? And eventually, I pretty much blamed web development. And I thought, it's these frameworks, they keep getting rewritten, and this is what it is, and there has to be another way. And so I made this framework called Trongate, which was an attempt to try and be more productive. And along with it, I launched a site called Speed Coding Academy, and I thought, I'm going to find a faster way of doing this. So that all happened about 5 years ago. And here we are today. And Trongate now has over 1,000 GitHub stars, and people like it, and all is well, you know. But there's one little problem, folks. You see, I've been doing a little bit of work dipping my toes back into the industry again. And I'm slightly ashamed to tell you this, but I feel as if I'm almost back to the eye patch version of me. Almost back to where I started, because all of those problems that I had 5 years ago, where things are just taking ages, are happening again. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing wrong here? Because, you know, I've had a terrible flu, that's for sure. But even without that, how come it's taken so long? I mean, I had this address book module that I was working on. It took me about a week. And it was I think it was 2 days ago, I realized it needed a feature. And I looked at the code, it was just like a mess. And I thought, I'm going to just rebuild it. So then I rebuilt it yesterday, then looked at it again, and I thought, it's still a mess. And again, I found myself on the verge of a sort of developer's breakdown. And I was like, I'm supposed to be smarter than this. Why is this so difficult? And anyone who's been watching the live streams, you've seen that. You've seen me working on the same things for weeks and weeks and months and months. But then, in a moment of divine inspiration, it hit me. And if I take you back to those old videos, you'll see the answer. The answer. Well, if you see here, a warning for workaholic developers. So I was putting in the hours for sure. But look at the title here. This simple JavaScript error has almost put me out of business. Interesting. When I look back on those times when the brakes were on and I was going at a snail's pace and miserable and overworked, and clients getting in touch saying, where's that thing? And I'm like, I'm doing it as fast as I can. Whenever I look back on it, do you know what the one thing is that is common to all of those episodes? JavaScript. It's JavaScript. It's never PHP or CSS or HTML. Let's say it's JavaScript. It's never database stuff. It's always JavaScript. And then I thought, well, if you look at the amount. I mean, I can only speak for myself. I think I'm typical of other developers. But if I did like a pie chart of the amount of time I spend on things when I'm doing development, I reckon 90% of my time is spent on JavaScript. And it's been that way since about 2015, since AngularJS came along. So you're looking at a guy who has spent about 90% of his working time with JavaScript. And I've used some of the frameworks like Angular and things like that. And eventually I gravitated towards vanilla JavaScript, eventually actually building my own JavaScript libraries for Trongate. And they're good, I'm happy with them, right? But the point is that I'm starting to think that maybe I've misdiagnosed the problem. Because when I think it's so obvious now, that time from 5 years ago when I was really struggling and just sick and working 20 hours a day, and then with this recent episode of a little bit of a productivity challenge, it was always the JavaScript that was slowing things down. It was the JavaScript that was giving us the browser compatibility problems. It was the JavaScript that was giving us the rewrites, more so than any PHP framework. It was the JavaScript that was confusing and just problematic. And it was the JavaScript that was just making my life a misery. Now, I don't want to sound like a reminiscing old fool, but there was a time when I was far more productive than I've ever been. And what I used to do pre-2015 was I used little bits of JavaScript here and there, but very seldom. I would treat JavaScript as being like a cherry on a cake. So you'd maybe have a little alert, thanks or something, just little simple things, nothing complicated. But if you think of a website or a web app as being a cake, the big old foundation was PHP, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript was an afterthought. And when I needed something fancy with JavaScript, which happened every now and again, I would just hire somebody. And that was how I worked. And I earned a little bit more than I'm earning today, So 2015 AngularJS came along. It was probably earlier than that, but that was when I got involved with it. And from that day to this day, the productivity just went through the floor. Now, Trongate has been good because, pardon me, the Trongate architecture is excellent. It's modular, it's reusable and all of that. I'm happy with it. And it's necessary for Trongate to have all of that JavaScript stuff. And that'll continue. Excuse me, my cat was in and there's all cat hairs everywhere. All over my face and everything. My Coco was climbing about here a minute ago. Anyway, I had this thought, which was, what if we just got rid of JavaScript? As crazy as it sounds. So if I take this address book thing, right? I mean, I don't need to show you it, but the idea is create address. Now the JavaScript version, a little modal pops up, a form, and it pre-populates and you submit it, and it'll have a spinner when you submit. Then depending on the response, it might get a tick animation or a cross animation. Don't forget, you have to pass your tokens in. You have to gracefully deal with situations when people have not signed in, or if token has expired or something like that. There are so many moving parts, and all of those moving parts can break, by the way. So I thought to myself tonight, what if I just decided no more JavaScript, or at least as little as possible, just bare minimum JavaScript. And I thought, well, what have I got to lose? I'm on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown here. So I now did my third version of this address book, and I thought, right, I'm going to make this PHP heavy. I went in, and in 2 hours, I achieved more, and I was more productive than 2 weeks of JavaScript. And I thought, you have got to be crazy. And then as I looked at the apps, and anybody who's a member of the channel, I'll show you them tomorrow. And as you look at them, to the untrained eye, they are the same. They look the same. They're both fast. They're both nice. They have beautiful forms and everything. They do the same task. It's just that one of them is really dependent on JavaScript and the other one is not. And then I thought, well, if you think about, let's say, a simple task manager, the most simple app you can get, right? If you do something like an old school PHP HTML version of that, think about how easy it is. One page that has a form, brand new web page, it's just a form, create or update your record. Another page that displays records. Another page that shows individual records. And that's it. I mean, you know, it's so simple and it's so beautiful. And okay, maybe you've lost a little modal or an animation or something, but who cares? When's the last time you visited a website? Any site, eBay, whatever, and you clicked on a page to fill in details, and it did a little pop-up and you said, oh, or maybe it just took you to a page with a form, and you says, oh, I would have preferred if it was a little JavaScript pop-up. You've never had that thought. In fact, you've probably never even been aware of these types of things. You just fill out a form and that's that. And this takes us back to the fundamental inconvenient truth of web development, which is that a web application is really just a skin for a database. Think about that one. And when you start to look at it that way, suddenly you realize that we have made things far too complicated here. Now, don't get me wrong, occasionally you might get a client who really needs something to have a certain look, and maybe they want that desktop app feel about it, and I get that. I have a gig coming up where that may well be a requirement, actually. But for the most part, for 99% of things that you're working on, that's just not the case at all. And if you think about big websites, when I say big, I'm talking about like government websites, sites like the DVLA, which is the Driving Licence Agency in the UK. I'm not sure if that's what it stands for, but it's the place in Wales that handles your driver's licenses. These people are maintaining these massive websites that deal with tens of millions of people. And when you go on sites like that and you're filling out a form or something, it's simple. It's like, here's the page with the form. Here's the page that shows you the thing. Here's the thank you page. It's simple. And we developers here who are trying to be on the bleeding edge, we've lost the plot because we've made it all far too complicated. There's far too many moving parts, and I could easily do a full conference and break down all of these different web apps and show you how JavaScript just slows things down and breaks things. Now, somebody could argue the case that a JavaScript heavy website looks nicer. And I would agree, actually. But that margin of looking nicer is minuscule. To the untrained eye, it's probably not even noticeable. And the real kicker is that it comes at the expense of productivity. I think that as time goes on, web developers have become less and less productive. And it's funny because we've now got ChatGPT and all sorts. So anyway, I hope I've given you something to think about. The punchline for me is that, for me personally, JavaScript is dead. I'll use it occasionally, but I'm going to go back to being a PHP developer because I can do things much, much faster, and so can you. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll talk to you soon.